Welcome back to episode 3 of Breaking Barriers. I'm Maryam, and I'm joined with Chris, and today we have two wonderful ladies on the pod. We've got Kait and Liz from the Offside Rule pod.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys?
We're really well. We're both actually enjoying a little bit of downtime during the week because Kait works weekends now and I'm on the off season, in between seasons for football.
Yeah, so it feels quite nice. This is always a weird time actually if you work in football, because you have the panic that you aren't working, and if you're freelance that doesn't feel right and it sends you into a bit of a spin. And I think Lynsey sort of knows this because we sort of have this conversation at this time. Well, it isn't normally at this time, is it? It's kind of normally June time every year where you just panic a bit because you're not used to not working, and so you kind of then start to question whether everything's going to be okay for next season. Have you got enough work booked in? Are people going to honour the work that you think that you're going to get? So Lynsey's having a well-earned break because she must have done, a zillion and one miles, virtual miles and real miles.
Virtual miles this time.
throughout the last 6 weeks or so, and I'm getting used to kind of completely giving up all my weekends again, which I haven't had to do for a few years.
Absolutely buzzing to have you guys on a podcast which has gone pretty much from rags to riches in some respects.
God, I wouldn't say that.
But yeah, well, we
can always do with more riches, Chris.
in the terms of success anyway. So we'll start from the beginning for you guys. So we'll start with you, Lynsey. Where did your foray into the sports industry come from?
So I had a radio background, and then I think because I came into radio at a very young age, a lot of people that I worked for were always quite bemused as to why I wasn't doing television, because I think it's quite notorious in the industry that unless you're at the very, very top when it comes to radio, it isn't as well paid. In fact, there's a lot of radio presenters out there who did local radio when I was starting out that, quite often struggled because it isn't that lucrative. I loved sport. Sports journalism was what I'd always intended to do. And of course, sport always feels like it's more of a visual medium. I know that we have got exceptions with TotalSport and 5 Live, but I think generally speaking, it's something that a lot of people want to watch and engage with. So I did think I should try. My last year at university, I was part of a student TV show, and that won an award. And I think that gave me that little bit of a confidence boost to think that I could do it. I had a very nice letter from someone from BBC Scotland who said that I should go into that as a career. And I think that gave me the push. So at the time that I met Kait, we were both part of something called Top TV Academy, which I don't think Kait exists anymore.
No.
But we used to go to sort of networking events, and that's how we met each other, because we were both coming into the TV industry fairly fresh-faced and new. I don't feel like that anymore. And then we were both going for auditions for similar things. We both did a little stint, which we'll definitely skip over because we definitely don't like dwelling on it, but we did some quiz TV, which there were some channels that were rife about 10, 15 years ago where you could really just practice and hone those presenting skills, which we both did. And then we both did an audition and moved to Sky Sports at the same time. So we've known each other for a fair while, haven't we?
Yeah, we have a long time, and that's part of the secret of it, I think, isn't it, Lynsey? Is that we are friends and we understand each other. We both do kind of slightly different things now. There's never been any competition between us anyway, because I think we've always worked in slightly different areas within sport, and that's definitely been a huge positive for us, is that we are friends. We do talk about non-work stuff as well, and we kind of know each other's partners, we know each other's lives, and that's really important, and that's I think a big kind of common thread when you get often women working together. I have to say it's as much about supporting each other as it is about supporting any kind of business that you might then end up running.
And I know that she's not here today, but you've also had Hayley working alongside with you on the pod and at Sky Sports, and again, another amazing woman.
Yeah, and Lynsey and I met at Sky Sports, and actually Lynsey came up with the idea doing a football podcast and kind of played around with a few formats, one of which I was involved in, which was a roundtable format where you got 3 women together and he started talking about the game. And she was working with a really well-respected BBC producer at the time. Again, the producer was giving her time for free, and she sort of said, look, I kind of really like this element of it. So Lynsey took that and approached me and asked if I'd be interested in kind of teaming up with her and doing it on a regular basis and backing the podcast and sort of coming more on board. And we tried out a few different people who we work with, and then just randomly I got chatting to Hayley. She'd been at Sky Sports originally a few years earlier. She'd been sent to Manchester United TV to kind of gain more experience and sort of live TV experience. And she eventually came back to Sky, and that's when I met her, as did Lynsey. And we were just sat in the makeup room, as you do. It's about the only time where you get sort of 40 minutes of unadulterated kind of gossip chat time. And I, after talking to her, I just really liked her. And, you know, Lynsey and I will always say this, we kind of love working with people who are just like us, you know, happy to be there, ambitious, but kind of wouldn't sort of tread over you, know their sport, don't ever feel intimidated about giving an opinion. And Hayley was like that. And I remember saying to you, Lynsey, actually, she just feels like she's one of us.
Yeah.
And, you know, she just settled in so quickly because we didn't really know her particularly, did we? But she's one of those people, Hayley, who makes you feel like you've known her.
Absolutely, I can imagine. And so talk to us about the forming of the podcast, because it's quite, even though podcasts have been around a long time, they haven't really come to fruition until the last sort of 4 to 5 years. So how did you come to, well, sort of start the podcast, basically?
I'm hoping that some of my radio friends don't tune in, no offense, but like I'm about to call them geeks. So I hung out with those radio types that just knew everything. And honestly, they're infectious, because when it comes to audio, they were always trying new things. So I had a couple of people in particular, a guy called John Mooney, who is behind the Rookery End podcast, which is actually also part of the Athletic stable now, but I've known him from student radio and I've known him for years and years. And as long as I've known John, he's always been experimental with trying new technology and trying new things out. And I was sort of keeping one eye on what he was doing, and he was sort of venturing into that space at that time. And another is Ant McGinley, who I work with. I used to present in the Virgin Megastores. Now, way before both of your time, there used to be a huge, where the Primark is on Tottenham Court Road, there used to be a huge Virgin Megastores, and it was the national hub, if you like, the HQ. And you used to broadcast radio programs to the Virgin Megastores all throughout the UK when there were lots and lots of them. And that was one of my first radio jobs in London. I used to present on that station, presenting music shows, and Ant was one of the other presenters. And he was into podcasting a good 3 years before I even started it. But he told me, and between the two of them, I'd been picking up that this was something that was worth doing. And I think because of doing television, and because I started in radio, and that was my real love, I have to say, I was just missing it. I was missing audio, and I just wanted a way, and it started out just being a bit of a hobby, really, and a project that I could do with some friends to actually get back to doing what felt like radio again. Of course, podcasting is a form of that.
Yeah, I think also for us as well, I mean, we've been podcasting for over 8 years. There was a period probably about 4 or 5 years ago where just everything went a bit quiet on the podcasting front, but we'd always been okay with securing sponsorship or just securing enough cash to kind of pay, whether we were talking about the website domain, whether it was equipment, whether it's trying to send people to games, and we weren't, you know, interested in it being a business, really. I think sort of 3 or 4 years ago, when, as you mentioned, Chris, podcasts suddenly became really, really big, we found ourselves with this huge listener base, because we'd been around, and we'd sort of developed a bit of a cult following as well, hadn't we, Lynsey? Because we were sort of one of the early stakeholders. We'd got this lovely base of sort of regular listeners who've been with us, bless them. I mean, they must have heard some of my stories at least 3 times over by now. But they've been with us for years and years, you know, nearly a decade. And we realised that the space was getting really big, and shows were getting, really, really noticed. And we were sort of there and thereabouts, but we needed to make a decision really about whether we were going to carry on doing it as a bedroom podcast or whether we were going to try and make a go of it. And we tried to make a go of it because we believed that it was an important project to push, and because we had this lovely listener base. But about a year ago, it just, well, even less than that, I think it basically did get difficult to try and get it sponsored, because you're also up against people who are setting things up in their spare time, who are doing it for free and are happy to do it for free, and that's all good. But I think we'd reached the point where we'd been doing it for free for so many years. We're all sort of 15, 20 years experience within the industry, and we thought, you know what, we need to start taking this seriously. We need people to take us seriously, and so therefore we need investment. And we have had investment, but I think, I mean, definitely a couple of years ago, we basically reduced the output down to, it basically started off as one show every fortnight, and then it went to one show every month, and they were just with big name players, so that it basically cut the amount of work we had down to a level where we felt like it was still fine for it to go to free, but if we were going to do any more, then we needed some investment. And then up popped Muddy Knees Media.
I think I'd started being a contributor just in the very infancy of me being featured on Totally Football Show, and Muddy Knees were behind that podcast, and I started sowing some seeds with Ian Mackintosh, who ran the company, to say, you know what, why don't you work with us? Because we've been around for a while and you're wanting to get females involved, and we've got the only all-female fronted podcast about football. So I think he was our person that backed us. I think everybody needs that one person, don't they, that really gets you. And straight away, a little bit like you were describing with Hayley, Kate, we met with Ian and we just really clicked from the very beginning. I don't think there was any airs and graces. We were just straight in with, this is who we are, this is how we work, and we loved that. And we loved that he was really backing us, and he still does. And I think that was what we needed. We needed to then bring it to a new potential audience via the other podcasts that he ran, but also to a new professional level. And then that meant also having to bring it back weekly. And then we actually thought, let's get our heads round bringing it back to once a week because of all our schedules. And by this point, we're all working at different places. So what was once very easy to record, because the three of us were all at Sky Sports, now had like this geographical element to trying to get us all in the same place to record. And then Ian was like, well, not only do I want you to do this once a week, but I want you to do a WSL edition as well. So we're going to do 2 a week. And then Kate and I were like, what? We're going to go from 1 a month to 2 a week. But I have to say, we've not looked back, and it was the best decision we've made. It has been difficult along the way. We did put the requirement on the WSL show to be made in the same professionalism as we do for the Offside Rule Thursday/Friday show. And the same that we would on any of the other podcasts that come under the Muddy Knees umbrella. And that meant that it was going to cost more, because the studio hire, it's a professional setup. We have a producer for each show, all these different things that come into play. And we didn't want to negotiate on that. I think there could have been the option to try and do what we did many years ago and start off running something for free on the side. But that isn't what it warranted. It warranted something that was on level with everything else out there.
And I think throughout the years we have built up allies within the industry as well, and that's really important if you're starting anything new. And I know I've sort of talked about this within the all-female space as well, is that it's so important to have male allies. There's no point being strident feminists and going, well, we're doing this because we're women. It was never about us doing it because we were women. It was doing it because we couldn't find anything else like it, and we wanted a chance to have our opinion expressed. And at that time at Sky Sports, we were, generally reporting on the news. There wasn't much commentary on what we thought about the state of the transfer window, how much clubs are spending. And so for us, it was an opportunity to kind of find our voice. And it's so funny now, Lynsey, because you hear women and professional or former professional players talking about this a lot now. Now TV companies aren't afraid to have a female, whether it's a journalist or whether it's a former player, current player, expressing their opinion. But back in our day, there was just really none of that. You were there to present the show, there to present the papers, interview the guests. You weren't really allowed to debate football. And that's essentially where the podcast came from. But we obviously had an issue beginning of the year, wasn't it? I'm just trying to take myself back through the timelines now. But in January, basically, Muddy Knees made the decision that because they'd been unable to find a sponsor for the women's podcast, the WSL edition, that they would have to put a pause on it. And we were heartbroken about that, but we were also baffled, as were Muddy Knees, about how difficult it seemed to be to secure a sponsor for it. And that we'd heard so many good intentions after the World Cup. And Lynsey and I have covered 2 World Cups by being there, I suppose, but kind of numerous other women's tournaments too. And it really did feel like, I mean, everyone would probably agree, it felt like last year's World Cup was, another turning point, another point to gauge interest from. And just none of that actually turned into proper commitment. And we weren't looking for mega bucks. We were just literally looking to kind of cover our costs, basically. And eventually Football Managers stepped in to help. And thanks to Miles Jacobson for that, because, he basically saved it. Brands too can't just talk a good talk. They have to back stuff. They have to back women's football properly, not just rely on Lynsey and I giving up our free time to kind of cover it.
But I guess with like all the awards that you guys have won for being a sort of primarily female-led podcast, and like you mentioned the years and sort of allies you made and just recognition and coverage, and then not to have people follow through at that.
Yeah,
it's
it was mad. Yeah, I mean that's what the world is like, and that's maybe also a saturated podcast market. Although there aren't many women's football podcasts, not many specific to the WSL anyway, and there aren't any female-fronted podcasts, football podcasts really. It still just goes to show that nothing's ever done until it's done. Nothing should ever be presumed, I suppose. And yeah, I mean, just like we've had sometimes sort of sponsorship money, or we've been asked to get involved with a project, and that's meant that we've had a bit of money for it, which we've been able to put in the bank, to put towards equipment, to put towards running it. Just like that stuff's come out of nowhere. Equally, on the other side, the sometimes lack of support, lack of people putting their money in their pockets has also come from has also come as a surprise too. So I guess I would just always say to people, if you can start your project with a sponsor, brilliant, but don't get into podcasting to make any money from it, because it is hard to do that.
Yeah, we found that out very, very quickly as well. So you mentioned there's not many fully women-fronted football podcasts out there. Would you say that the sponsorship has been the main challenge for you guys? And has there been any sort of weird responses to the fact that you are women talking about football and there is that perceived judgment?
I don't think we've done too bad in terms of reactions on, like if you're looking at Twitter and trolling and all those sorts of social platforms where you might get the whole get back in the kitchen and those sorts of elements. We don't tend to get that very often. I'm not saying we haven't had it at all. But I think generally if people listen in, they realise that we have an opinion, but also we don't try and replicate being guys talking about football. It's interesting, actually, as someone who does Totally Football show occasionally and then does our show, we're lifestyle-y. We're not trying to outstat each other. And I think there can be an element of that when you listen to men's podcasts. There is a little bit, if you've got a lot of opinions from lots of different guys, there's usually that like trying to outdo each other. Sometimes
a little bit of willy wagging.
And we don't really ever venture into that, and we don't go in to massive analytical detail. Not to say that we couldn't, but I think we are very conscious about the fact that we want our show to be accessible. And as much as we very much welcome guys listening, and I have to say, like, probably still to this day, it probably just edges it in terms of our audience being slightly male heavy. We've got a lot more percentage of women than a lot of other podcasts do. But still, you know, the majority of our listeners are probably just about men. And so we absolutely welcome guys listening and enjoying the show. But what we don't want to do is alienate women listening to it, because that's the main focus is trying to make sure that for those women like us who love football, who've gone to football for many years, you look around stadiums now, they're half full with women. And we're still pretending that this is just a men's sport, and it isn't. We all have opinions on it, but I think there is an element of, you know, when it comes to phone-ins, I think women are just a bit more hesitant because of the things that you're mentioning, because of trolling, because of reactions, and just feeling like, oh, you know what, I can't really be bothered putting myself forward for that, to have an opinion just to be shot down again. And hopefully we have that safe space where people can listen and think, actually, I was thinking that too. And we don't always swear to be 100% accurate as well, because it's such an easy conversation with us being friends that, you know, I think something happened in the last couple of weeks and I was just talking off the top of my head and got a fixture wrong or something, but it doesn't matter. I think the main thing is it's a platform for people to enjoy hearing about football, maybe in a slightly different way to some of the other podcasts that are out there.
And I think some men like that. We often get feedback from guys just saying it's just a really, you know, easy listen, and it's if you want stats about the game, or you want to learn about the tactical formational genius of Pep Guardiola, you'll probably tune into different shows. We won't tell you about the tactical formational genius who is Pep Guardiola, but we'll tell you what kind of stuff he likes to eat, what's going on at home for him, how his trousers are the magic to his. It's just a different look at it, basically. And I think a lot of guys like that because it's not meant to be intimidating. It's meant to be a really easy, light, you know, funny look at the world of football. And that's how we live our lives. If we go and have a coffee or we go to the pub for a drink, we don't sit there sort of lining up all the salt shakers, you know, talking about how so-and-so played out of position and this and this. We tend to talk about the more lifestyle element of it. And that's sort of what the podcast is like, I suppose.
So to finish off, from both of you, what sort of advice would you give to any young podcaster just starting out? So we'll start with you, Lynsey. What would your advice be?
I think my advice would be find your USP, your unique selling point, because the podcast market is flooded now. So in order to stand out, I think you really need to have something different. Football, if you just take that as a general market, if you look at how many football podcasts are out there, wow, it's so hard. So you need a different idea. Maybe you have a really great connection that you can utilize. Maybe you have a different take on things. Maybe you can, I don't know, put poetry with football and make a podcast that way, or something different. But the thing is, the just bog standard having a chat about football is probably already covered and is a difficult space to enter into. So I think try and be original with your ideas. I think if there's one thing that I've learned, and I know Kait is the same because we've got like a production company as well during lockdown, is that ideas have been our currency. And I don't think you should ever underestimate having a good idea, testing it out and seeing it through, but also knowing, and I think that's something that we did a few times, was sat down and talk, knowing if it's time to call it a day. And we have to have those chats quite often, you know, is this still working? Is it still something we want to do? Is it still what the audience wants? And just being able to be self-analytical in that way as well is really important.
Yeah, I'd say if you're setting up a podcast, just purely on the practical side, especially if it's a brand new product, do it once a week. And that's probably the sort of minimum, really. And you need to try and publish it at the same time each week and on the same day. So Thursday afternoon or a Saturday morning, and just keep it going, basically. I think I read some stats about how many podcasts have been set up during lockdown, and you can bet your bottom dollar probably 75% of them started, went great, and now are no longer, or have been left where they are. So if you're going to do it, don't put yourself through all that work and then stop doing it, unless it is just purely a bit of an experiment. Start it, keep it going every week. Try and publish on the same day, preferably around the same time each week, and just keep on going. You'll only build a regular audience if you keep on going.
We've got a whole list of women I think we're working our way through. We get to tick off 2 more
Good.
this week.
Good.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a real pleasure having you guys on Total Sport. Make sure everyone goes to follow Lynsey and Kait on Twitter. They'll be in the description. And subscribe to Total Sport, because at the moment of recording, we're only 5 subscribers away from 450. Come on, you people. It's for free. It's for free, all right? But yeah, anything else from you, Nazza?
No, I'm just really glad to have insight from 2 amazing women in the industry. And I feel like as Chris and I are podcasters and have just sort of started out doing our own thing, I feel like I've learned a lot today, and I'm really glad of that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for getting us on. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much for watching, everyone.
Good luck with it, guys.
Next time.
Cheers. Bye.